Okay.
So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I would just like to welcome you all to the first conversation we're having with the absolutely fabulous and hilarious, I might add, Miss Ada Deer. As many of you know, each year our school's Committee on Diversity and Inclusion chooses a book with voting across the faculty, staff, and students for an all-school community read. And this year we chose Making a Difference, My Fight for Native Rights and Social Justice, written by Miss Deer. Before we begin the event, we would just like to acknowledge that the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work occupy ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Teejop since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and the state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk people from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. Our conversation today will be the first of two with Miss Deer in regards to her work around Native rights and continuously fighting against the oppression of Native peoples. The second conversation will occur at some point in the spring, so stay tuned to that. Watch your emails and your Friday delivery by our director, Christy Slack, to know when that's coming up. Sherry Meeland, a part-time program MSW student, and a member of our Committee on Diversity and Equity, will be facilitating today's conversation with Ms. Deer. We ask that if you have questions to put them in the chat function. We will be monitoring that, and we will have some time set aside at the end for questions and answers. Whatever we don't get to today we're hoping form some of the conversation that we have in the spring as well. So on behalf of the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work, I want to sincerely thank you, Ms. Deer, for spending your time and sharing your wisdom with us today. So grab your beverage for the next 75 minutes. We'll sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Sherry, and I'm going to switch the screen to Ms. Deer.
Thank you, Lynette. First, I just wanted to say welcome and thank you all for coming today. Again, I'm Sherry Meeland. I'm a Master's of Social Work student here in the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work. And I'm very excited and honored to have this opportunity to spend the next hour or so in discussion with Miss Ada Deer. Miss Deer is a remarkable woman with a long list of accomplishments. After termination in 1961, she worked in Washington with the Bureau of Indian Affairs to restore tribal sovereignty and achieved that in 1975. She went on to teach here in the UW-Madison School of Social Work, as well as continue to serve the interests of her Native community. She was the first woman to hold the position of Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs under the Secretary of the Interior in the 1990s. And she ran for Wisconsin Secretary of State in 1978 and congressional office in 1992. Ms. Deer, thank you again very much for speaking with us today. To start us off, I wanted to talk a little bit about social work, because obviously this is the School of Social Work. It's very clear that you are proud of being a social worker and have used social work skills in many aspects of your life and career. Please tell us more about why you love social work so much and how social work skills have helped you in your work.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to take part in this community read, and I was bowled over when I was informed that you all had selected my book, Making a Difference, for that. And I told people that the school had ordered 400 copies and had run out of copies. So I'm excited about that and appreciative and grateful that the school has arranged for this. Now, I know that we have about an hour And I would like to begin with just a little background about myself. I am a member of the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin. My father was the native person. My mother was white. She had English heritage. And I have two brothers, two sisters. There were five of us living on the Menominee Reservation, and we grew up there on the banks of the beautiful Wolf River. We lived in a log cabin. It was kind of rustic, but my mother, who came from an entirely different world in the East, she thought it was cool, and she enjoyed the life that we had. We had no running water, we had no electricity, we had no telephone, we had no inner plumbing, but we had the land. I went to sleep often with noise from the river, the beautiful Wolf River, and we had birds and other animals that came through our fields. And so I grew up absorbing a love of the land, a love of my tribe. And it is such satisfaction for me to tell people about my tribe and about being a social worker. I, first of all, usually say that I'm a Menominee Indian enrolled person. I'm a social worker, I'm a woman, and those are not high ticket items in the society of today. But I had a wonderful mother who used to always tell me, Ada dear, you have a brain, use it, because I was a very sensitive person, and I always asked my mother for permission to do this and permission to do that, and she would always retort and say, well, you've got a brain, use it, why are you asking me? So after a while I quit asking her and just started operating on my own. I grew up there on the Menominee Reservation, except for 5 years during World War II. My father was in the service, and we had our early education in the wonderful Milwaukee Public Schools at the time. We came back to the reservation, and we were the first grade school kids who went to the Shawano Public Schools. There were Catholic schools in each community, Kashina and Neopet, but my parents said, no, you're not going to the Catholic schools. And my father had been put in a Catholic boarding school and had a terrible time there, and that's another long story. But at any rate, graduated from Shawano High School, graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, went to the New York School of Social Work. That was the name it was called in 1957, 58 when I entered it. I then took 2 years out and worked in Brooklyn with low income people. Most of them were from the Caribbean islands, and they were very polite, and they would always call me Miss Ada. And I enjoyed them immensely, and we had lots of fun together. We had programs. I got speakers. I didn't know how famous this person was, but I did ask the minister of the church. I said, I would like to bring in a speaker to our people, our students there. We also had my colleague who was in charge of the boys, and we had dances and speakers, and it was a very positive experience for the neighborhood children and students. Well, I ended up calling this guy. It was John Hope Franklin. And you know, he is a very famous scholar, but I didn't know it at the time. And he gave a wonderful talk to the young students. And that's an example of what kind of that I did. And then I've had a lot of different other experiences with my work, but I am guided by my mother's example. She was a nurse, and the Indian ladies would come and talk to her, and she wasn't practicing medicine, but she would listen to them. She would comfort them. And she said, well, I think you might have a problem there, and you should go to doctor. And so she was an important person in the lives of many of the Indian women on the Menominee Reservation. Our tribe is the only tribe that never came from elsewhere. We were there always. And many tribes have been moved around through the policies of the federal government. And we take great pride in being in our ancestral homeland. And we have a beautiful forest. It's very central to our identity. People from all over the world come to see it. You can see it from the satellite. Our forest is so beautiful. We're very proud of our forest. It serves many purposes for the tribe. Our tribe has a lumber mill. Our forest is managed on a wonderful basis so that we don't cut all the trees down. And we have a selective system of cutting the trees. And so many men worked in our lumber mill, and so did my father. He did hard labor for 30 years to support us, and I give him a lot of credit for that. And of course, our mother really spent a lot of time with us, and she was very influential in guiding us to our educational endeavors and up various opportunities for us. And sometimes she would say, Ada dear, you need to do this or you need to do that. And I'd say, okay, Mom, I was a very obedient child. She always treated me as an adult, and she was very important in my formative years. And one time she said, Ada, you're an Indian. I said, okay, Mom. I was trying to figure out what she was trying to tell me. And she said, you were put here on this planet for a purpose. And I said, okay. And you are to help your people. No, I didn't know what she meant by that, but I said, well, okay, and that stuck in my mind. And so, and help was not a foreign concept, because with 5 kids in this log cabin, plus assorted cats, dogs, baby goats that my mother liked. So we had a full cabin, and I enjoyed taking care of the little animals and also my brothers and sisters. So help was not a foreign concept. And I want to just mention, I never heard the word social worker until I got to college. And my advisor at the time mentioned that I was good with people, because when I was a senior, I decided I better major in something. And because I had 3 years of integrated liberal studies, which is a wonderful liberal arts course. And then he said, well, you're really good with people, and you should be a social worker. Then I started thinking about various people that had come to visit us, and they never used the word social work, but they were helpful, and they worked for the state of Wisconsin. So I thought, okay, that's for me, and I want to go to the best school of social work. So I went around as a senior and I interviewed various people. Where's the best school of social work? And they told me it was the New York School of Social Work. So I applied and got in and had just wonderful classes there. Well, except one, that guy didn't know how to teach, but I didn't know it at the time. And I enjoyed my classmates. This is the time I had to really associate on a more consistent basis with my Black college students and the Jewish people. I lived on the Lower East Side in Henry Street Settlement, and I got exposed to all kinds of people there, different types of Jewish people. And that I was fascinated by all of this. And I had, in my placement, I had to work in a public housing project and interview it was 16 stories, and there were 8 families per floor. So I had to interview all those students, all those people. And I got to meet Puerto Ricans and Italian people and different Jewish people and regular white people. Anyway, it was a wonderful experience there, working with all those people, trying to help them understand about the neighborhood. I lived at Henry Street Settlement, and that's a very famous settlement house. So I could go on, but tell me if I'm following what you originally asked me, because I have a tendency to wander.
Yeah, no problem. You were giving a great overview of your life. I didn't want to interrupt you. I had asked about what you love about social work and what social
Oh.
work skills have helped in your work. I
Oh,
was
what I
listening,
love about social work. Okay. Uh, many-
listening and thinking about, oh, I'm sorry, go
Okay,
ahead.
let me answer those two first. What I like about social work is that many people want to help, but actually help is a very complicated process. And in the social work education, you learn how to actually help people. You learn how to interview people. You learn how to assess people. And you learn how to relate to people. And you can, with your excellent focus on trying to find what the problem is and what the situation is, you develop more understanding that really helps as you proceed in whatever you're doing. So I think the approach of understanding and learning about the whole person, the whole community, is the best way of interacting, and it has enriched my life immeasurably. I love being a social worker, and I'm sorry that we don't have more. And some of you young students may have heard that social work is a noble profession. And I want to emphasize that, because most people, when I tell them I'm a social worker, they said, "You're a social worker?" So then I have to give them a lecture about how valuable we are. And I want every social worker to be proud of it and be able to help people understand how important we are in terms of helping people. And I get a lot of satisfaction out of doing this. And let me give you one example. My first um, time when I was at the neighborhood house, my first job after graduate school in 1961, there were not many Indians that went to college, and I didn't know of any that had master's degrees in social work from the School of Social Work. And I studied under wonderful, wonderful professors, and of course, many of the night on my little portable typewriter that I had to spend all night writing my term papers. But it's certainly worth it. And so I got a superb education at the School of Social Work. It changed its name after I came back. I took 2 years out to work in Brooklyn with young students there. And when I came back, it became affiliated with the Columbia University School of Social Work. So I'm very proud to be a social worker, and I advertise it all the time. And all of us need to help people understand. And your social work skills, I use all the time. Well, first of all, when I see somebody, I kind of look at them, and I'm very interested in teeth, because when I was in second grade down in Milwaukee, we had school nurses, and they had these blue uniforms on, and I was really impressed with them. And then one day, the teacher said, "Well, boys and girls, you're going to hear from the school nurse, and she's going to talk to you about your teeth." Okay, teeth, I thought to myself. Well, then the nurse came in, and she had this humongous toothbrush. And she said, "Oh, hello, boys and girls. I'm so-and-so, and we're going to talk about teeth." Well, this toothbrush will help you understand how important it is. And so she would say, "Well, now you have to brush your teeth after every meal, and you have to go up and down, and you have to go across. And actually, you should brush your teeth at least 3 times a day." And so I started looking at people, because people smile, and sometimes their teeth are poor, and that's hard, because the teeth are important, and they're important to your health. Well, anyway, so I get a lot of satisfaction out of being a social worker, because I can help. I know how to support people, how to help them through some of their difficulties. I am not a therapist, but I relate to people well. I like people, and they feel this, And it's a lot easier for them if they feel comfortable with you. And so since I was born an adult and became a helper early in life, it's good. So that's how I approach things. Of course, I moved on from working with groups of people. I'm very interested in the change of policy and the change of laws and really making a significant change at as many levels as possible. And in my life, I've been able to do that. And so I think if people want to really know more about it, they should read my book, Making a Difference. Because you can't just have the deer sit on a board and smile. No, I find out what they're doing and I help improve the operations of whatever board I'm on. For example, the Girl Scouts board, I got put on that board after a long effort by the person who was recruiting me. And she told me that it was the largest group of girls in America. That really intrigued me. And so I thought that, well, that's a good opportunity to influence a lot of people. So I was able to do that. So that's an answer to part of your question.
No, I think that's a very good distinction about the importance of the people skills on the micro level, as well as the macro level impact that we have as social workers with policies and sitting on boards as well. I really like the story about your mother telling you to use your brain, again, as an example of social work value to empower people, right? Like use your brain, figure out what works for you. Thank you.
Sure.
Moving on a little bit, you talk extensively in your book about the Menominee tribe and what it has gone through in terms of history, actors in creating change, as well as those who have disrupted progress. Your work as a new social worker, as well as with the federal government, produced both highs and lows. Could you talk a little bit about how you work through disappointment and what has kept you going and achieving throughout your career?
Well, first of all, I'm a very strong person. You have to have a lot of strength in order to move from poverty to the middle class. And I was blessed with good health. My mother was a nurse and she saw to it that all of us had our inoculations and that we had good food and so on. And so now tell me again, I kind of lost my thought here on what I'm talking about here.
How do you work through disappointment and what has kept you going?
Well, I don't accept disappointment. When I decide to do something, I get it done. And I am furious about all of the inequalities in our society. And I've learned a lot about the poverty, not only among our Indian people, but among society as a whole. And we're still, as a society, it's a very, very sad statement that we have people that don't have health care, millions of people that don't have health care, that have poor educations, and on and on. And I think it's important for all of us in this society, especially now, to work at every level that we can, because every person is precious to me. Every person has their strengths, they have their weaknesses, and we should be, since we're supposed to be the wealthiest country on the planet, it's a big stain on our honor. And to see that millions of people don't have health care, they don't have good educations, they have poor housing, the unemployment ranks high, etc. I think we all know that. And I can get livid over reading the one page of the paper every day, but then I pick out what I can work on. And so since I'm an Indian person, I'm especially interested in that. I should say I'm half and half. I was a Martin Luther King speaker once here in Madison, and the people who spoke before me gave some information about their background. So I decided to say, well, I'm half and half. My father was Indian. My father was a speaker of his language. He was a hunter and a fisherman. And my mother was a nurse. She was white. And I claim both of them. So with me, you get double trouble. And they all laughed at that because I don't think enough people appreciate their heritage or the heritage of other people. And you have to respect, really truly respect people. And they have to feel this for you to be successful in whatever you're doing. Injustice really galls me. And so I try to be a good representative of women, of American Indians, and of social workers in everything that I do. I'm not clubbing people on the head with all of this, but I'm very conscious of what I'm doing. And I succeed. Lots of people don't. And my success, if somebody's that's down and out starts smiling and functioning well, that's a success, you know. And so at any rate, I don't accept defeat. And with my tribe, this whole country never knows what to do with the Indians. We're hello people, we're still here, we're not going anywhere. And you should understand that that's the way it's going to be. And if people in the educational system had courses on American Indian history and culture, on the courses on Black studies, I got to go to China a couple of times, and I asked myself, what do I know about Chinese? Chinese laundry, Chinese food, and I knew that they had helped build the Western railroads. That's all I knew. And so I didn't know anything about China. So on my way over there, I whipped through several books, and I was glad that I did, because I met somebody who had been on the long march with Mao Zedong across China. And he was so surprised that I had read about it and that I knew something about it. So again, each of us can be an ambassador of good. And I want to say they call social workers, do-gooders. Well, yes, we're do-gooders. And we all should be do-gooders to help our fellow human beings. So now with my tribe, this is extremely important, because our tribe, the policy of the government was to terminate the tribes in the 50s. That meant you broke up the treaties, the policy made us poor. It was a cultural, economic, political disaster. And lots of books have been written about it, because many of the Indian people at that point could not resist these injustices that the federal government pushed on us. And when I learned that our tribe got terminated in 1954, and it got restored in 1973. But lots of our people suffered a great deal. Many of our people died. We didn't have any health care. The jobs disappeared. The white superintendent that came in after termination fired 150 men. That was 150 families, because we weren't making money. This society makes money. Well, yes, we all need money, but many of the tribes are poor, and that's because the land was taken away, resources were taken away, and then that's a whole long story. And I knew some of this, but when I found out that they were selling our land, I decided I am going to do something. I am not going to allow this government to take our land. It's our land, it's our homeland, and this is wrong. So in order for you to understand that, you might want to read my book, but there's lots of books about the Menominees, because we were able to achieve tribal restoration. And this came from the grassroots of the people. I was at the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, working as the director of Indian Upward Bound when this all started. And I'm reading in the paper in the middle of Wisconsin that the Menominees are demonstrating. And so I'll just give you a few highlights. And I'm saying, what are they demonstrating about? And so I said, well, okay. Then about 2 weeks later, I'm reading about the same thing. So I decided to go up to my reservation, which is 2 hours away, which is one of the reasons I took the job. And there were their people. They were demonstrating because they were selling our land. Now, white people look upon land as a commodity, right? Native people look upon the land as Mother Earth. That's a whole long story to understand all that, but the big philosophical difference. And so with that, I decided that I didn't know anything about termination and I had to find a lawyer. So I decided that since I was in the Upward Bound program, which was an OEO program, Office of Economic Opportunity program, which was part of the fight against poverty. And so I found the lawyer. It's Legal Action of Wisconsin now, but it was called Wisconsin Judicare at the time. And only two programs from OEO times exist. One is Legal Action and one is Head Start. And those are wonderful programs. At any rate, so then I met with the lawyer twice and he explained all this to me. So I said, well, how can we change this? And he said, he didn't say anything. He was very, very pensive. And so I said, well, we have to change this because social workers are supposed to be change agents. And so I decided that I was going to do something. I didn't know what it was, but once I understood what had happened to our tribe, and that's a long story, but I just want to mention that. And so he said, well, so I'm telling him, well, this is a federal law. So we need to do something about that. And he said, what else can we do? And so he said, he was still being a little pensive, but then I said, well, we're going to have to get the law changed. And so he said, well, other nominees had come to see him about various problems, but they never came back. And I said, well, when I decide to do something, I stick with it. And he's looking at me. I said it about that tone because I was so livid about our land getting sold. And he said that he needed 2 more people as clients. I said, oh, well, okay. Well, I can give you 2. And I said, okay. Well, who? He said, my brother and my sister. Now, I didn't bother to ask them. I just signed them up. And of course, I knew that they would be happy to do this. So long story short, our group called DRUMS, Determination of Rights and Unity for Menominee Shareholders, which was the name that my sister Connie, who was at the university at the time, she came up with this name because you have to have a name if you're going to do something of this magnitude. And so long story short, we met with various people who were interested. We met with Senator Ted Kennedy in Milwaukee. Somebody knew that he was coming and he agreed to meet with us and we met with him. And people were very awed by the Kennedys and also by senators, by the government. Well, I appreciate whoever I'm talking to, but I'm not bowled over by them because I want to know about them and what they can do for my project, right? And so we talked with him and I ended up talking and summarizing what our situation was with our tribe. And he said, well, when you get to Washington, we hadn't thought about that yet, but he said, come and see me. So then the next question was, well, who's going to do this? And most of our people were very low income and they didn't have my wonderful education. So I remember what my mother told me. So I said, well, this is it. And this is it, Ada. You're doing what your mother told you for a change. And so, actually I did other things too, but still. So then I said, I'll do it. Now, of course, I didn't have any money either. I was in law school for that semester, but I decided my tribe was more important than the law school. And so I withdrew and started working full time. And anyway, that's on the project. Still, none of us had much money, but our determination and our love for our people and our love for our land was basic to all of us. Now, there were certain people on the Menominee Reservation that they had jobs and they were busy with them. And they told us that we were troublemakers and agitators. And that's why we didn't get good press when we started this. But we just met. We met in Milwaukee, we met in Chicago, we couldn't meet on the reservation to start with because none of these people up there that had the good jobs who were nominees were about to give that up, And I'm really still angry with some of those people. But at any rate, so I go to Washington, and anyway, long story short, we did have wonderful help from NARF, Native American Rights Fund, which is a legal entity, a law firm that helps the Indian tribes nationally, and it's been in operation for over 50 years now. They gave us excellent lawyers, Professor Charles Wilkinson and Yvonne Knight, who was a member of the Ponca tribe. And they were excellent lawyers because they listened to us. They met with us as groups. And I went to as many meetings as I could and helped move things along. Other people helped too. So it wasn't just me, but being the loudmouth that I am, and I had my good education, I could explain to the press and I could explain to the lawyers and so on. So I went to Washington, and we did have meetings to say what we wanted in the Menominee Restoration Act. And it was very interesting to me. We would have meetings and I say, okay, now this is our Menominee Restoration Act. What do we want in our law? And first of all, people were kind of quiet, and nobody ever asked them what they wanted. And of course, this is very basic, to respect the people, to ask them what they want, And so finally we got started, and people did make suggestions, and we had drafts that were drafted up by the lawyers, and we finally came up with a draft. But it was a long process, because drafting up a piece of legislation of this magnitude and this importance was big. But I figured out that, and I was always complimenting them. I thanked them for their time. I thanked them for their efforts. And I developed some good friends among my Menominee people, because I had been away for a long time and going to school and then working in Minnesota and so on. And so I just used everything I knew that I had learned in social work school, and I had learned in my various positions since then. And I was the right person at the right time, because nobody had the leisure that I'd had, and they didn't have my type of education. Some people had education, but it wasn't at the level that mine was at. So I go to Washington, I go to the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs. The first guy I see there, he says, well, this will never happen. He was a lawyer. I figured I better start with the BIA, right? To let them in on the secret, And it wasn't a secret, but well, I said, well, I explained to him we were terminated and we were going to be working for the restoration. And that's why I'm coming to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And that's never going to happen. So I said, excuse me, who's your supervisor? So he told me who he was. So I go to see the supervisor, who is this kind, gentle, grandfatherly person with beautiful white hair. And I told him, and he said, oh, well, we can help you with that. Most people, they get no at the first effort, they collapse or they retreat. Not me. I'm a determined deer when I decide I'm going to do something. Okay. So I talked to him, and we got the support of the Bureau of Indian Affairs then. The current commissioner at that time was an American Indian, and he was from one of the Eastern tribes, Lewis R. Bruce. Everybody called him Uncle Louie, and he was a delightful person. And then he hired a number of Indians at high levels there. And of course, this upset a lot of the BIA people, because they were hoping that they would get named to some of these positions. But well, okay, so we then had to get the bill introduced. So we had to get our congressmen and our senators and all these people, and we met with our congressman then, who was David Obey. He had a very distinguished career in the Congress. He was there for 40 years. And first of all, you have to fight the people that are the gatekeepers. And finally, we got through the gatekeeper, and we got to see him. And he listened and he said, well, this sounds possible. And so he wasn't saying, well, that's a good idea. Let's get on with it. But he didn't oppose it. So I thought that was good. And I went to see Senator Nelson, Gaylord Nelson's staff. They were wonderful. Senator, who's the other senator from that time? Oh, I can't think of, he was the runner. You don't know. Okay, I'll think of it. Anyway, the staff people, you have to get to the staff people. And we did. And so I went to the commissioner, I finally met them, and I got into how, and I never took a course in lobbying, you know. You don't have to take a course in everything. I just knew what I needed, and I knew I got invited to some of these receptions, and I found out in Washington you get a lot of stuff done at these receptions, and so I did. And so we had a wonderful reception that Senator Harris and his staff organized, and lots of people came because they were a very popular couple, LaDonna and Fred, and they had good contacts. So I thought, wow, is this what happens when you introduce a bill? Well, I found out later, no, but I didn't know any difference. And so it was wonderful help from Senator Harris and LaDonna Harris and the two senators, Senator Nelson. I don't know why I'm blocking on the other one. I know who he is. At any rate, all the staff members were really, really good. And there was a staff member in the office of Udall in the House. And there was another staff member in the Senate who was an Indian person. They were both Indian lawyers, Indians who were lawyers, and they helped. And so I challenge people, you can really help with the restoration, do something positive for justice. And so I had a long trek going to various offices, but I was up to it. And anyway, to make a long story short, why I talked about it in the book, we, a small Indian tribe with excellent legal help and the hard work and the support of our people, achieved a historic reversal of American Indian policy, which then meant other tribes could do this too. But equally important is how we did it. And I want to say to everybody, just because there's a wrong out there, you can work at it and get it changed. And I'm really proud of the inscription on the rock of the University of Wisconsin that was placed along with others in the garden. And it says, on my rock, it says, no, I didn't try to get this. I get this call. I get lots of calls from all kinds of people. I get this call from the then chair of the executive director of the organization, the alumni club, alumni association. And I recognize her name because I make it my business to know whatever I'm into, where the power structure is. And I get to know who they are and do they really do their work, or did they just breathe and take up space, you know? And so that's important to analyze the power structure. And so on mine, it says, let's see, if there's a federal law in your way, change it. Nobody can tell me about this, but I'm saying, yes, that's right. I would have said, if there is a law, it wouldn't just be federal, you know, in your law, in your way, you could change it. Well, anyway, that's a long story. And I was the person who was doing the lobbying, and some of our people did come to Washington, but they were really surprised how much work it was and how hard it was. And I was the right person at the right time, and I didn't take no for an answer. And one time, and I'll just close with this particular point, you have to know yourself, and I want to memorize or memorialize this to the young people out there. Know yourself. And if you can't be just dilly-dallying and just messing around, you have to really look hard at yourself and know what you can do, what you can't do, and then what the other people can do and what they can't do or won't do, and then you can proceed accordingly, okay? So I went down once to the BIA Congressional Affairs Office, and I talked to the guy down there. He was a lawyer, and he was, you know, he was a pleasant guy, and he was supporting us to start with, and so on and so on. Well, then I went back. You can't just see somebody once. You have to really be attracted, or you have to really be knowledgeable about what's going on. So I went to see him once, and I said, "Well, how are you doing?" And then he said, "Well, I'm doing okay." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I just came from a meeting over at the Interior Building, and we were talking about your legislation." "Oh, you were? Wow. What were you talking about?" And he said, "Well, we were talking about amend." "Wait, stop right there." I said, "Amend?" And he's looking at me, and he's kind of puzzled that I'm reacting this way. And he said, "Well, yes." I said, "Whoa." I said, "You and I both know the difference between in some of the legal language that goes there." I said, "I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin, Madison. I have a master's degree in social work from Columbia University. You and I both know the difference between amend, tinkering around the edges, and repeal." Okay, Ada, okay. So if you look at the Menominee Restoration Act, you will see the first words are to repeal. We didn't want to amend anything. We wanted it repealed. So if I hadn't taken that strong attitude and approach to this guy who's a lawyer who should have known better, and we would have been in more trouble, but I don't think it would have gotten through because our two lawyers would have seen that. At any rate, so that is an example. You have to know when to act. You have to take, and of course, the Bureau of Indian Affairs has been in such power over the Indians for such a long time, that most Indian people over the years are afraid of the BIA. And that's very regrettable because they're supposed to be serving the Indians, not bossing them around. I worked in the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Oh, let me say, I got dragged into the Bureau of Indian Affairs for 3 years. And I told them, first of all, when they approached me on working, I said, "No, I like my job. I'm working at the neighborhood house and I like my job. And no, I don't want to work at the Bureau of Indian Affairs." They said, "I know what the Bureau of Indian Affairs does. The social workers, they take little kids away, babies away from their parents, and they adopt them out. That was a big program way back when." And I said, "I can't do that, and I won't." So the area director was kind of surprised because lots of people want to get into the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and I didn't want anything to do with it. Well, later on, then he came back and he said, "Well, we have a different job opening and we'd like you to come for you." So it was community services coordinator. Oh, well, that sounds more like it. So I was getting ready to leave the neighborhood house anyway. And it was a long story before all of this. But anyway, so I took the job and I worked 3 years there. I was well treated, but nobody paid any attention to me. I would write memos. I'd see different things going on and nothing would happen. And I did go on a 6-month training trip that Philio Nash, who was the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, decided I should take. And later on, I found out that it was the only training program, if you could call it that. And I used to tease people, and they would say, "Well, who are you and what are you doing?" And so on. I say, "Well, I'm a social worker. I work at the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I'm here to learn about your people. I spent a lot of time in the Southwest. I went to all 19 Indian pueblos too. I went to the Navajo Reservation. I went to the Hopi Reservation, and I went to a number of other reservations and so on and so on. And it really expanded my knowledge of Indian people and my appreciation of Indian people. And so anyway, that's why I talk a lot about understanding people and their culture and their situations and so on. And I used to say that if I was really feeling naughty, I said, well, actually, the commissioner is my sugar daddy. Of course, they wouldn't know how to say it, if they should believe me or not. I told him that, and he and his wife laughed. They thought that was so funny. I actually became good friends with both of them, Phileo Nash and Edith Nash. They were, hey, what is this?
The dinghy,
Yeah.
people are joining.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I don't know. No, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
No, I think it's great. More examples of, perseverance and the difficulty in getting legislation through Washington, as well as, meeting people where they're at and empowerment by all the educating you did by visiting the different groups. But I did want to pick up a little bit about the protests, specifically drums protesting in 1971. You describe in your book, and this is a quote, they were friendly and well-behaved, totally unlike how the newspapers described them, which I see as a parallel with what's going on today with protest movements and the way that media describes things. Do you have any thoughts of how we can protect not only the right for peaceful protesting, but also encourage accurate representation of protests and better media discussion of issues rather than the inflammatory things that we often get?
Well, most media people, in my opinion, are under severe deadlines, and they only have a certain amount of time to find a story or write a story about whatever they're assigned to. And since our educational system doesn't produce knowledgeable people about Indian affairs, that's really very evident. And I think I mentioned this earlier about how the reporter from NBC didn't want to listen to me. She just wanted to ask me some questions, and I was supposed to make a headline, which I refused to do. Actually, I remember I went to a special distinguished lecturer session, and the lecturer was chosen by the students here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he was Robert Kennedy. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So I listened to him, and somebody then they were talking about various items. And then I saw an opening, and so I decided to talk to him and ask him. I said, well, what is your opinion about the media and how they portray events? And he told me, actually, he said, I'm paraphrasing, but I know this is what he said. He said that the media are criminally negligent in their responsibilities to the American public. And I thought, wow, criminally negligent. That is a strong statement. But many media people don't have the time, they don't have the knowledge, and therefore the American public is deprived of a lot of the accurate information. Now with us, the drums people, we marched from our reservation down to the Capitol, Madison. That's about 250 or 300 miles. And they wanted to call attention to our cause and then to meet with the governor. And we got press. I didn't march because I can't remember why I couldn't do it, but anyway, I didn't march, but other people did, and they met with the governor and the staff. Governor Patrick Lucy welcomed the tribal people with open arms. He listened to them, and he then agreed to come to the reservation. And in some of the books, you'll see pictures of him looking at our lake and our land. And he was very, very open to our people. But the other people who were against this, they didn't want to be disturbed. They didn't want to lose their jobs. They didn't want any change. And they never came to any of the meetings that the Drums had. Our meetings were open for everybody who wanted to come, and they didn't bother to come. So at any rate, that was an example of a peaceful march. But sometimes in order to get attention, our efforts get misconstrued. And so that's probably what happens.
Yeah, thank you. You also discuss in your book the founding of the AIM and the use of violence and radical behavior to enact change as different from your path of working more within the system to enact change. What words of advice can you give to members of our social work community working towards social justice goals today? And along with that, how did you manage kind of being in the middle of these groups? So groups with different opinions within the tribe as well as within the greater community.
Well, first of all, with my tribe, we're all tribal members. And we had an election before restoration occurred. We could elect 2 members to the group, an entity called the Voting Trust. And so 2 of us Drums people got elected. And the first meeting we went to, and it was really interesting. These tribal members, they didn't smile at us, they didn't nod at us, anything. The other lady with me was Georgiana Webster Ignace, and she lived in Milwaukee for a long time. She and her husband were very active in tribal affairs down there and Indian affairs down there. And her husband was Dr. Ignace. He was a medical doctor, and there's a wonderful clinic that has his name because he worked so hard to help our people. And our people, I mean, not just Menominees, but people in Milwaukee, Chicago. There are many, many more Indians in some places that are in the cities, they're called urban Indians, than live on some of the reservations, because there was a relocation program started by the government a long time ago, and a lot of people then moved to Milwaukee. So, okay, now tell me again what the question was. Oh, the AIM. Yes, I was lobbying for our people in Washington, and one of the staff members told me, well, there's all this action going out west with the AIM people, and they're really helping you. I said, what? They're helping me? And he said, yes, you are here working for your people on legislation that will help them. And that's in contrast to the headlines and to the actions that AIM was taking. And they also got involved in violence. Now, let me say that most people don't know this, but I worked in Minneapolis way back when, my first job after graduate school. And I quickly learned where the Indians were, and they knew where I was, and so on. And so the Indian people there decided that they were not going to put up with the harassment of the police. And they had put bands, I don't know if they were, I think they were red bands or maybe they were black bands, our bands around them. And they would march on Franklin Avenue in Minneapolis on weekends. And that was to give some protection to the Indians, because the people there, they drank, and they were just regular people, but they were Indians, and they were easy prey for the police. Now, I am not against police, but I think that they get carried away with themselves when they are confronting or work or seeing people of color. And I think we all know that now in this time and age, 2020. At any rate, they started this very peaceful march on weekends, and it stayed peaceful. But then later on, the more people came, and I don't know exactly when AIM got started. They claim that they're the ones that bring about things. No, they actually were headliners, in my opinion, and they caused a lot of problems for people. And that's a whole long story, but I knew Dennis Banks's sister because she lived in the neighborhood house area, and her little children came to the neighborhood house, which is how I knew them. And AIM soon took over this marching and got into more different kinds of action. But you should ask yourself, what did they accomplish? I accomplished, the Menominee accomplished the passage of the Menominee Restoration Act. AIM got headlines. And I know a lot about AIM, but I don't want to go into all of that because that's a sideline. But that's what people think. Oh, AIM, I'm thinking AIM, people got put in jail. People were hurt. Some people got killed, I'm told. I don't know for sure, but it doesn't surprise me. And they didn't really practice what they preached. They took care of themselves. By that, I mean the so-called head guys, Russell Means and Dennis Banks, they were the two main ones. And then they had their underlings. And I know I've met some members of the Means family, and I don't know what their stance was toward Russell. Russell got into the movies, and Dennis Banks, he got into producing Indians. He wrote a letter to Dear Abby once and said that his purpose of the land on the earth was to propagate as many Indians as he could. And he always found the innocent little women that were awed by him. And one time somebody asked him, or he admitted to a certain number of people or children that he had. I can't remember the number, but it was astronomical. Like, I don't know if it was 20 or something like that. I mean, can you imagine admitting that and being proud of it? Did he take care of them? No. I went to an event in Minneapolis. I'll give you an example. And this couple came up to me and they said, can they talk to me? I said, okay. So they came to talk to me and they said, well, they had one of Dennis Banks' children. And I said, okay, to myself. And they said, and they're reading about them in the paper. There was Kunstler, the famous lawyer. He was defending the AIM guys, and that was in the paper, headlines again. And what did they accomplish? They got headlines. And Dennis Banks made a few more conquests, right? He'll laugh if he ever sees this or hears about it. But the parents who had him, his child, they said that the child could read about his father in the papers, but he didn't receive any call from Dennis Banks. He neglected to even contact his kid. That's AIM for you. There's a lot more, but it shouldn't be published because it's so bad in my opinion. And people always ask me, well, what about AIM? Because AIM got all these headlines, but what did they do? Dennis Banks married a Navajo woman. That was unusual, marrying somebody.
So
and, then they got into some kind of legal problem. And he refused to accept the jurisdiction of the Navajo Tribal Court. Now here these guys are running around the country at that time, pounding their chest, talking about tribal sovereignty and Indian rights and so on. Well, if he cared about tribal sovereignty, why would he treat work system at Navajo that way. Hello, duh. Yeah, see, but most people wouldn't know that. And now
And
they have a hard time with knowledgeable people like me.
Right.
I'm bringing it back to, again, the social work values and that persistent, the idea of macro change by lobbying and working hard to spread your legislation more than, headlines or media splashes that grab attention, having that persistence behind the ball. We are nearing the end of our time here today, though. I want to say thank you very much, Ms. Deere, for talking with us, as well as to all of you for attending. And Amanda Angola, the Associate Director of Field, wanted to say a few closing remarks. So thank you again, everyone, for being here today. And especially Ms.
I
Deere.
would like to say a few closing remarks too, if it fits in.
Well, I mean, I was going to do the final wrap up. So Ada, if you want to take a couple last minutes.
I just want to thank you. I just want to compliment all who came up with this idea and who worked to bring it about. I think it's a wonderful way to reach a lot of people, a tool of the new 21st century technology. And I want everybody to be proud of being a social worker, to take that extra step of advocacy. In my opinion, we don't have enough advocates in the field of social work. And I understand that to a degree, because if you're a school social worker, which I was for a year in Minneapolis once, and you're overwhelmed for the most part with your job. But it would be wonderful if there could be a lot more advocacy and a lot more knowledge and appreciation about the social work profession. There are very famous social workers out there, and that's another story. But again, if there weren't social workers, they would still have to invent social workers. So thank you all, you wonderful do-gooders. Keep on doing good. Yay!
Thank you so much, Ada. It was really wonderful to hear your stories and your nuggets, and we're hoping that we can continue this conversation in the spring. And we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Also, thank you, Sherry, for facilitating the discussion. You did a wonderful job. I really appreciate that too. I also want to thank the planning committee, Aaron Rosh, Sherry Mealand, and Hee-Jin Kim. Thank you so much. In our effort to encourage folks to continue reading the book, we have a couple of fun quizzes that we are planning to offer in the spring. So take a look, keep your eye out for those. We'll just be, you can submit your answers, and then we'll have at the end in the spring, we'll have some cool prizes. So from a drawing. So hopefully everyone can participate in that. Also over winter break, we're hoping to have a watch party of a video related to some of the themes that Ada has talked about in her book. So please keep your eye out for that event over winter break. Thank you all for being here. This is a wonderful event, and we appreciate you taking the time to be here. Enjoy the book. If you haven't started reading, I hope that you can pick that up, and it's a great book. So thank you, everyone.